April 12th, 2025. It was just 20 days ago, on March 24th, that editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, reported that the most senior members of the Trump administration discussed a military strike on the Houthis in Yemen on an unsecure commercial messaging app, and that they included him on the chat. Their Signal chat, which Goldberg published later in response to the administration's insistence that there was nothing classified in the chat, showed that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth had posted precise details of the munitions and planes involved in the strikes. It showed that neither President Donald Trump nor the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a Biden appointee, was on the chat, and that White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller apparently made the decision to strike based on his interpretation of what President Donald Trump wanted. In violation of the Presidential Records Act, the app was set to delete the messages. There was apparently no larger strategy or diplomatic plan other than to strike, and participants greeted the news of the collapse of an apartment building into which a Houthi leader had allegedly walked with emojis of fists, fire, and a U.S. flag. This extraordinary lapse in national security protections would normally have defined an administration and caused a number of resignations, but the White House called the case closed on March 31st. And there was more. On April 2nd, Dasha Burns of Politico reported that the team working with National Security Advisor Mike Waltz regularly used the unsecure Signal app to communicate about issues involving Ukraine, China, Gaza, the Middle East, the U.S., and Europe. The officials to whom Burns spoke said they had personal knowledge of at least 20 such chats. That story has been almost completely driven out of the news by President Donald Trump's tariff machinations since April 2nd. On that day, after teasing the idea of what he called Liberation Day, Trump announced that at 12:01 a.m. on Wednesday, April 9th, he would be imposing a 10% tariff on all imports to the United States, with significantly higher rates on countries he claims engage in unfair trade practices. By the next day, it had been established that his team, led by trade advisor Peter Navarro, arrived at the tariff rates with a nonsensical formula that simply took the U.S. trade deficit with a country, divided it by the value of that country's exports to the U.S., and cut the resulting number in half. For the next week, the stock market plummeted, jumping only with rumors that Trump would back off on the tariffs, while economists and financial analysts revised the chances of inflation and recession upward and economic growth downward. News coming out of the White House was contradictory. One advisor would say that Trump would not negotiate over tariffs and they were here to stay, while another would say he intended to negotiate and they were just starting points. Meanwhile, as predicted, other countries began to put tariffs on goods from the United States or pause exports, and global markets fell. Americans, from business leaders to small business owners to consumers and wage workers, called out the stupidity of Trump's trade war. Others noted that the tariffs appeared to be intended as a shakedown, as countries or businesses who offered Trump the right price could get exemptions. As trillions of dollars in stock values evaporated, Trump insisted the tariffs were here to stay. "I know what the hell I'm doing," Trump told Republicans on Tuesday, April 8th. He boasted that global leaders were kissing my ass. On Wednesday, April 9th, at 9:33 a.m., he posted, "Be cool. Everything is going to work out well. The USA will be bigger and better than ever before." At 9:37, he posted, "This is a great time to buy, DJT." But as Tyler Pager, Maggie Haberman, Anna Swanson, and Jonathan Swan of the New York Times reported, Trump's team, led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, was worried about setting off a financial panic that could not be stopped. Driving their concern was a broad sell-off of U.S. government bonds, which in the past investors had seen as a safe haven during times of market turmoil. and the rise in popularity of the government bonds of other countries. Former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers noted that global financial markets were backing away from U.S. assets. Fund manager at Penn Mutual Asset Management, George Cipollone, told Bernard Condon and Stan Cho of the Associated Press, "The fear is the U.S. is losing its standing as the safe haven. Our bond market is the biggest and most stable in the world, but when you add instability, bad things can happen." On April 8th, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer defended Trump's tariffs to the Senate Finance Committee. He was offering similar testimony before the House Ways and Means Committee the next day at 1:18 p.m. when a social media post from Trump pulled the rug out from under him. Trump paused most of the highest tariffs for 90 days and instituted an across-the-board tariff of 10% in their place. But, perhaps unwilling to look weak, he announced that he was raising tariffs on goods from China to 125% effective immediately, based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets. With Trump's tariff pause, stocks jumped upward in one of the biggest single-day gains since World War II.
By emphasizing the principles
hedge fund manager Spencer Hakimian posted a graph showing that NASDAQ call volume bets that stock values
quality of
would rise,
opportunity for youth and for others,
minutes before Trump's
jobs
announcement.
for those who can work,
He commented,
security
"Not a good
for
look at
those
all."
who need it.
Representative
The ending of
Alexandria
special privilege for the
Ocasio-Cortez,
few,
a Democrat of New
the
York,
preservation of civil
reposted
liberties for
Hakimian's
all,
post and added,
the
"Any
enjoyment
member
of the
of Congress
fruits
who
of
purchased
scientific
stocks in the
progress
last
in a
48
wider and
hours should
constantly
probably
rising
disclose
standard
that
of living."
now." I've been hearing some
He
interesting
called
chatter
for
on the
the
floor.
cooperation of
Disclosure
free
deadline
countries
is May
working
15th.
together in a friendly,
We're about to learn a few
civilized
things.
society.
It's time to ban insider
The
trading
gulf
in
between the
Congress.
ideals of democracy and the reality of
David
life
Smith
in the
of The Guardian
segregated
noted
U.S.
that the
during and after
juxtaposition
World
of
War
Trump
II
golfing, dining with
galvanized Black
donors,
Americans,
and meeting with
Mexican
race car
Americans,
drivers,
and
even
Asian
as economic
Americans to
chaos
demand
tanked
equality.
people's retirement accounts,
They successfully
prompted
challenged school
accusations that he has
segregation,
lost touch
racial
with
housing
reality.
restrictions, state
A widely
laws prohibiting
circulated
interracial
video
marriage,
that appears to
and
be Trump
anti-Chinese
bragging to
laws based on
NASCAR
the
drivers
1882
visiting the
Chinese
White House
Exclusion
that
Act.
investor Charles Schwab made
As the military
$2.5 billion
fought fascism
on
in
Wednesday,
Europe,
and
schools
that
and
another
churches
investor
at
made
home
$900 million,
emphasized that
has
democracy
fed anger at
depended
Trump's
on
economic
acceptance
chaos.
of racial, ethnic,
On
and
Friday,
religious
the University of
differences.
Michigan released
Rallies
its well-respected
championed diversity,
consumer
and
sentiment
government-sponsored
index,
films
showing that
warned
consumer
Americans
sentiment
not to
about the
succumb to
economy and
fascist
personal
propaganda.
finances fell for the
Posters
fourth
trumpeted
straight
slogans
month,
such
dropping
as
11%
Catholics, Protestants,
from March.
Jews, working
Consumers
side
from
by
all
side
political
in war and
affiliations
peace,
fear recession,
and reminded
inflation,
Americans not
and
to
unemployment.
infect their children
This
with
level of
racial
consumer
and religious
sentiment is the
hate.
second lowest since the
In a
index
1947
began
radio
in
show,
1952.
Superman fought a Ku
Chief
Klux
U.S.
Klan-like
economist at
gang
Pantheon
trying to keep foreign-born
Macroeconomics,
players
Samuel
off high school
Toombs,
sports
told
teams.
the Wall Street
And in
Journal's Harriet
1949,
Torrey,
comic book
consumers
artist
have
Wayne
spiraled
Boring
from
portrayed
anxious
him on
to
a poster,
petrified.
urging a group of
James
American
Knightley,
school
the
children
chief
to defend
international
their
economist
classmates
at the
from
multinational
un-American
banking and
attacks
financial
on their
services
race,
company,
religion,
ING,
or ethnicity.
noted that consumers appear
In the
to blame Trump for
1950s,
their concerns.
those ideas had produced
While in
a
January,
liberal consensus
44% of
shared by
respondents
most
told
Democrats
researchers
and
that the government
Republicans
was doing
alike.
a poor job of managing
The government
inflation
should
and
regulate
unemployment.
business, provide
Now,
for basic social welfare,
67%
and promote
say so.
infrastructure. In other
The
words,
change
it should
happened so
reflect
quickly that White House
democratic
officials
values.
could not tell reporters
But
what
when
the
the
actual
Supreme Court's
tariff rates were
1954
for
Brown
different
versus Board of
countries.
Education
When
decision
more information
tied the
was
federal
available,
government
Kevin
not
Shaw
just
of the
to economic
Washington
equality
Post
for
noted
white
that Trump's new
Americans,
tariff
but also
levies
to civil
had actually
rights.
increased
Opponents
tariffs
of the
rather
liberal
than lowered them,
consensus
because he had
resurrected the
dropped
same
rates only on
argument
goods
former
from countries
Confederates
that
had
don't
used
export
after the
much to the
Civil War
U.S.
to couch
He had
their
raised them
ideology in
significantly,
economic
not
rather
just
than
to
racial rhetoric.
125%, but to
rejecting the idea of
145%
equality.
on
They
China,
argue
a
that the
major
government's
trading
effort to
partner.
protect civil rights
On
was
Friday,
tantamount to
China imposed
socialism because it took tax
125%
dollars
tariffs
from
on goods from
hardworking
the
white
U.S.
men to provide
A
benefits
spokesperson
for
for the Chinese
undeserving black
Finance
people
Ministry
who wanted a
said that
handout.
Trump's tariff machinations
This idea
will
gained
become a
momentum
joke
after
in the
Congress
history of
passed
the
the
world
Voting Rights
economy.
Act in 1965
At 9:20
and gradually
a.m.,
came to
President
include
Trump
people of
posted,
color and
"We are
women who
doing really
demanded
well
equality.
on our tariff policy.
In 1980,
Very exciting
Ronald
for
Reagan
America
rode
and the
the
world.
idea that the
It is
liberal
moving along
consensus was
quickly.
simply a way to
DJT.
redistribute wealth to undeserving
The new
Americans of
tariffs
color
had
or
badly
women,
threatened
or
Apple
both,
Inc.
like Reagan's
and at
welfare
10:36
queen,
p.m.,
into
the
the
U.S.
White
Customs
House.
and Border Protection posted
As
a
more than
notice that
$50
various
trillion
electronics,
moved from the
including
bottom
smartphone
90%
and
of
computer
Americans to
monitors,
the top
are
1%
exempt
between
from the tariffs.
1981 and 2021,
When economist Justin
Republicans
Wolfers
deflected
commented,
attention
"I
from
just
the
want to tip
hollowing
my
out of the
hat
middle
to the crack
class by
team of White House
demonizing
economists
racial,
who were able to
religious, and
discover
gender
in just a few
minorities.
short days
By
that the U.S. is
2012,
dependent
they were
on China
talking of
for
makers
smartphones,
and
computers,
takers,
and
and by
semiconductors."
2016, they were
Dr.
feeding
Soumya
voters ideas
Rangarajan
and
noted that
images
a
straight
basic
out of the
medicine we
nation's white
use 10,000
supremacist
times per
past.
day in the hospital,
By
heparin,
2021,
is
the
also
idea that
dependent
some
on
people
China,
are better than
and
others
people
and
will
have a right
die
to rule,
without it.
the same
As
ideology
Sabrina
that had
Mali
driven
of the
the
Washington
Confederates
Post explained,
created a
about 12
mob
million
determined to
people
end
hospitalized
American
in the U.S.
democracy.
need heparin
The
every
rioters who
year, and it
attacked
is
the
only
U.S.
one
Capitol
of
on
many
January
medications
6,
that will be affected by
2021,
Trump's
to
tariffs
overturn the
on goods
results
from
of the
China.
2020 presidential election,
Josh Marshall of Talking
believed they
Points
were
Memo
writing a
posted
new
that
history of the
a
United
good way
States,
to see the current
one that
tariffs
brought to
as
life
of
the
literally
hierarchical version
today
of American
is no
history
tariffs on
claimed by
high
the
value-add
Confederates before
manufactured
them.
goods marketed to
On
middle
that
and upper
day,
middle classes.
one of the rioters
Massive
accomplished what
tariffs
the
for
Southern
cheap
troops
consumer
during the
items
Civil
that
War
benefit
had
those
never
lower
been
on the
able to.
economic ladder.
He carried the
While the
Confederate
damage
battle
from the
flag
tariffs, both
into
to
the
the
United
domestic and
States
global
Capitol.
economy, as well as the USA's standing
At the end
in
of
the
his
world,
life,
is not
General
yet
Grant
clear.
recalled the
All the
events of April
chaos
9,
has been about the prospect of
1865. What
While the
General
damage,
Lee's feelings
while the
were,
damage
I
from
do
the
not
tariffs,
know,
both to the
Grant
domestic and
wrote.
global economy,
My own
as well as the
feelings, which had
USA's
been
standing
quite
in the world,
jubilant
is
on the
not
receipt
yet
of his
clear.
letter asking to
All
surrender,
the chaos has been
were
about
sad
the
and
prospect
depressed.
of Trump's high tariff
I
rates,
felt like
not their
anything
actual
rather than
effect.
rejoicing at
Trump
the
appears to
downfall
be
of a
trying to
foe who had
downplay
fought
that
so
story
long
in
and
favor of
valiantly
demonstrating
and had
his
suffered
power.
so much for a cause.
As the tariff saga
Though
played
that
out on
cause
Wednesday,
was,
Trump
I
signed a
believe,
memorandum
one of
for the heads of
worst
executive
for which a
departments
people
and
ever fought,
agencies,
and
informing
one
them that
for
they no
which
longer
there
need
was
to let the public
least
know when they get
excuse.
rid of regulations that they determine are obviously unlawful. Kate Riga of Talking Points Memo notes that unlawful appears to mean anything Trump doesn't like. In a breathtaking violation of the Constitution, on Wednesday, Trump also went after two individuals, Christopher Krebs and Miles Taylor. Trump appointed Krebs to head the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, where in 2020 Krebs assured the American people that the presidential election had not been stolen. Trump now claims Krebs thus censored the speech of Trump loyalists. As a Department of Homeland Security staffer, Taylor wrote an op-ed under the pseudonym Anonymous, saying that members of the first Trump administration were pushing back against the president's policies. Taylor later wrote a book about his time in the White House that Trump claims was designed to sow chaos and distrust in government, and thus could properly be characterized as treasonous and possibly violating the Espionage Act. A grand jury believed Trump himself violated the Espionage Act by retaining classified documents. Trump stripped security clearances from Krebs and Taylor, and also from their employers. He ordered government officials to investigate the two men and to recommend appropriate remedial or preventative actions to be taken to protect America's interests. Employees at CISA told Kevin Collier of NBC News they were disheartened by the attack on Krebs and noted that staffing cuts at CISA had already severely degraded our capacity to defend critical infrastructure.
Letters from an American was written and read by Heather Cox Richardson. It was produced at Soundscape Productions, Dedham, Massachusetts. Recorded with music composed by Michael Moss.